All right, folks, so as the last few people are sitting down, how was the exercise? Did you find it interesting? Yeah? Do you want to come up? Let's just put these things on.
My favorite were the eyebrow people. I thought it would be disconcerting, but it's really warm.
Yeah, you see? And did you have any, was that like the whole sexual thing in this year?
Not at all. No,
right?
no. It felt just very welcoming.
Right. And
Yeah.
this is something, and this is weird, guys. You know it's coming, right? You know it's a manipulation. Well, not really, because people like making contact. But the point is, even though you know it's coming, it's an instinctive reaction, isn't it? Because our brains recognize these signals, because our brains give these signals. And so we can't help but have that same sort of reaction. So, exactly. Now, can you imagine, and I'll come to you in a second, if I may, can you imagine doing this now in a crowded restaurant or in a hotel lobby? If nothing else, just doing the eyebrow flash at the right time, and then we'll add some behavior on top of that to enrich it. You'll make more friends than you can count. And they'll go, I don't know this person, but oh my God, it's just looks like we knew each other forever, right? You come up here in a second, we can add that. So go ahead, Dave. Dwayne, sorry.
The pale-faced fellows they just felt so lifeless and dead.
So this is the poker face guys,
yeah,
right?
the poker face guys. They were
Absolutely.
just so dead.
Yes.
It's like I don't even want to talk to this person.
Right. Now,
crawl out of your coffin, please.
part of this is, by the way, when people don't like us, especially in a social setting, they'll school their expression. They'll be very reserved. It's hard. People who are hard to read. We feel insecure around them and so on, and that's part of what you're experiencing there. It's part of actually the signals of distrust or dislike. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So we do not want to be poker face when meeting people. Right? Why? Because it doesn't fit the social context. It's actually giving the wrong signals out. Does that make sense? So thank you. That's a great thing. So go ahead, Cassie. Let me just put this on for you.
Okay.
And there we go.
All right. Well, I was going to comment both about the inner smile and the eyebrow group.
Mm-hmm.
So the eyebrow group, when without that inner emotion, it was quite affecting. Like one person I actually just completely turned away from. I was like, whoa, complete threat.
Mm-hmm.
But it was just very interesting, all the confused signals you got amongst all
Right.
of them. But it's also funny that with them being the inner smile myself, that when you go up to someone with it, even people that weren't part of the group, they you could see the inner smile come out on them too.
Right.
And suddenly it just completely changed what they were doing in the first place.
Right. And by the way, you notice how when Cassie's talking about the inner smile, do you notice how eyebrow flashed in the middle of that? That's when she was switching onto it. That's why we do it. That's why we have. That's why we call this the instant report technique. Is really the inner smile. It kicks into gear our own greeting mechanism, and we can't help but do it. So thank you. It's an excellent observation. Go ahead.
Okay, so for the inner smile, were those the people that were basically flashers, or is it something else entirely?
The inner smile is basically you think of a person that you're connected to. It could be a parent, it could be a child, someone, your children, a good friend. It might even be a pet, someone that you feel an emotional connection to, not a sexual one, but an emotional one, right? And then all you do is, as you approach people, you maintain that feeling inside yourself. Right?
Okay, so the key is to be able to summon that at will.
The key is being able to summon that emotion at will. Exactly right. Because that creates the emotional context which will drive the behavior, which is the eyebrow flash, which will put the behavior in a correct context so the other people can actually read the signals congruently as opposed to the mixed signals that Cassie was referring to.
So then all of the things being equal, the same eyebrow flash, whether given from the state, that positive state that we should learn how to summon, or given without it, can have remarkably different responses from the other person.
Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Thank you.
And then the last thing is, all of this is we're doing this all with people that we're meeting for the first time, and we're trying to simulate that here in this room.
Yes.
What about doing this with people that we see in the workplace on a regular basis?
You will
or
do this
home,
automatically.
Or...
Do you want to know who likes and dislikes you at work? Yes? When you walk into work and say, hi John, hi Jack, and so on, watch their eyebrows. Seriously. The people who actually like you will go, hey Jack, hey John. Right? The people who don't like you, hey Jack. I mean, nothing in this world is 100% guaranteed, But this is about as close to a cast iron guarantee as you can get.
And so it's almost as if the first time you meet someone, it's almost like a cast has been set.
Yes, the first
Right.
time you meet someone, basically, there's a lot of research that shows that the first impression people have, the first opinion they form about something, becomes very difficult to change subsequently. It can be changed, absolutely, but it requires more effort. So once you set that initial eyebrow flash, the unconscious expects, it's basically saying, you're part of my group, you're part of the pack, you're accepted. The unconscious mind expects that, so it acts accordingly. I'll give an example, if I may. Some years ago, I was at funny enough, a hypnosis training. And there was a lady in that who, for some reason, just reminded me of my grandmother, right? There was just something about her just reminded me of my grandmother. I couldn't get it out of my head, right? Now, consciously, I did nothing. I did no interaction with her. I didn't talk up and talk to her or anything like that. I just went around this thing. First break, she comes up to me and says, "Hi, have you been to this course before? Have we met before? I don't know. I just feel so familiar," right? And that's, by the way, this is what turned me on to the idea of the inner smile. We used to call this the instant rapport technique. That's what turned me on to it. It was my feelings, because she looked like my grandmother. My feelings changed my sub-communications, my unconscious signals, and she responded to them. And it was that initial moment, because I didn't make eye contact with the rest of the group at the time. Maybe I did something funky with my shoulder, I don't know. But really, it was literally that one moment of recognition, and then I went, well, that's weird, and carried on with what I was doing, and then just sat down quietly, listened to the seminar, and did whatever. She came right up at me. So that first moment can have a huge impact. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And that's why we want to do this before the hand touches, the hand on the handshake in the Western sense, or in a more Eastern sense, the more formal bow and so on. Why? Because as you're approaching the person, they are evaluating you. It happens before the handshake, which is why a lot of the rapport techniques, I think, are problematic, because by the time they get to using them, it's already happened or it hasn't. Right? Does that mean that you can't shift things around? Of course you can. There's a lot of scope with this stuff, right? But the pattern has already been initiated. It's more effort to move the river once it's flowing than before it comes out of the chute. Does that make sense to you guys?
Yep.
Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank
Those
you.
are a great set of questions. Let me just turn over here and then I'll come back to you. Go ahead.
Some
of you guys want to come to this side for some reason? It's like, no, don't. You can stay there. It's fine. It feels imbalanced. I'm pulled this way.
Well, we don't want you to feel imbalanced.
Thank you. You see, there's a reason I like Nikki.
I was noticing with some people that their facial expressions and the way they held their bodies was almost choreographed, while other people, they were given the assignment and it felt natural. What's the distinguishing characteristic between the choreographed?
So did you guys notice as well, some people didn't, and I'll use my language for this, some looked more unnatural than others. Some looked like they were forcing the behavior more than others. And the key difference is state, how they're feeling, right? If I'm feeling kind of neutral, I'm, hi, I'm going to meet you now, right? My state is not aligning with my behavior. And feelings drive behaviors, right? We know this. This is about one of the few golden rules that you can come across in psychology. Feelings drive behaviors, right? It doesn't prevent behaviors from occurring, but it drives behaviors. So if you want to do this, and you want to do this naturally, so you don't come across like a socially awkward or weird, or I don't kind of get them like a mixed signal thing, your feelings must support your behaviors, and this is a behavior.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you should, by the way, also have noticed that the inner smile group, I think it was this group over here, were eyebrow flashing you without even realizing it. Did anyone notice that? Yes. And that's what we want to do, right? It's just if you know it, if you're aware of it, you can allow it to emerge more fully. You can encourage it, because then your unconscious mind goes, great, I'll do some of that stuff too. Do you see how that works? Please go ahead, Norman.
Yes, I was in the mirror group, and one thing I found is that felt like I was in a lucky group, because it felt so natural to me. And so I'm wondering if mirroring might not be like a first defense survival strategy for me, as to blend in.
It might very well be, absolutely. You'll find people who are very good at this tend to have a reason for being good at it. For example, someone during the break asked me, who are the best body language experts? As a rule, what I found in terms of the people I've met and I've learned from, and I mean formally as well as informally, those people who had a reason when relatively young to become sensitive to nonverbal communication, to body language, will be the best at it. I'll give you some examples. Milton Erickson's a classic. He developed polio, was paralyzed from the neck down for about a year of his life, or at least 6 months of his life. So he could barely speak to people, right? So all he had left was observational skills, and he became really good at that. Because that's the only way he had of connecting with people or interacting with them, was to observe them. Another example might be someone who grew up in a violent area or a violent household, because their self-preservation instincts are now kicking in to figure out, when is violence going to occur? When do I need to start protecting myself, right? Or when is it okay to just be relaxed? So those people will tend to have a stronger appreciation for nonverbals. Another class of people, this is part of what happened to me, will move to a new country where they don't speak the language. So all they have to evaluate what's going on around them is how people are physically responding to them. Does that kind of make sense? So the people who are very good at this tend to have had a reason for developing this as a skill set, and it's just naturally crowded through into adulthood. What I would like for you guys to do is to develop it now. There's no difference between now and earlier on. It's just earlier on you were guided more by your instincts because there was less thought going on, whereas now you might have thought interfering with it, which is one of the reasons we talked about not judging or evaluating what it means. For some time at least, you want to develop experiences first. Does that kind of make sense?
Yes.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, and the other related thing, as I was just speaking to Victor at the break, explaining that calibration, if anything, might be my weakness. But after this exercise, I could consider it to be my strength, and perhaps I was doing it so naturally, I was just oblivious to the fact that I was doing it.
Absolutely. And here's the other thing. The strange thing is, people think this should be more complex than it really is, and they overcomplicate it, and then becomes unnatural again, whereas the gentleman who was here a moment ago was saying, oh, you're hiding over there, right? So as he was saying, it starts becoming unnatural when you start trying to do too much with it. So this is a very natural function. It's inside every single one of us to be able to do this and read the results of this. The problem comes when we think too much. It interferes with our signaling device. If I may give you an example of what I mean by this. Has anyone here read the book called The Gift of Fear? Yes. It's a very interesting book, and basically it talks about how people's survival instincts are really good, and when there's basically two kinds of fears. The kind of fear where you're like, oh, I don't know if I can do this, and the fear which is so terrifying that you're almost compelled to act in some ways, right? The second kind of fear typically happens when your unconscious mind has read a situation and something is terribly wrong with it, even though your conscious mind can't accept it. An example he gives was a lady got attacked in the stairwell of her home, and before the whole thing happened, she knew there was something wrong with this person, right? But she felt he was being charming, he was being polite, so she felt kind of like, well, socially, I can't be mean to this person because he's so charming, he's polite, he's helping me out, and so on. And of course, that's part of what predators end up doing, right? If you look at the profiles of serial killers and so on, a lot of them are very charming people. They are exploiting the social contract to cause people to ignore their defense or their warning signals, right? But if you talk to people who've have escaped or survived some pretty unpleasant situations, most, if not all of them, will tell you that at some point they felt something was wrong or not quite right, and they ignored it. They trivialized it. It's like, yeah, it's just probably me. Does that make sense? We have that inside of each of us. We have the ability to read people exquisitely well inside each one of us. The problem is our thought patterns get in the way. Our social construct, our social programming prevents us from listening or interpreting the signals correctly because we'll tend to ignore it. Now, some of us are better at ignoring than others. We spend a lifetime going like, no, won't listen to that, no, I'm no good, I'm not very good at this, I'm probably getting it wrong. And of course, at that point, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Does that kind of make sense? So if nothing else, and thank you for bringing that up, Norman, if nothing else, I'd encourage all of you guys to just observe. Break it down if you need to so you have something worth observing. Contrast, one behavior to another, and not evaluate. If an instinct comes up about something, then go, oh, that's interesting. But do your best not to evaluate it. Don't feel the pressure of having to evaluate it, because that's your cognitive processes. That's all the stuff you already think you know, interfering with the process. Does that make sense to you guys? Yeah? Is this useful? Yes. Okay, thank you, Norman, very much. I'll go with Mickey and then with you. Okay. Oh, come with me.
I think,
Hello.
I think you almost answered this. I just want to verify. Can you change the nature of the response by the nature of the inner smile that's behind the eyebrow raise? In other words, if I'm thinking about my friend Ron Brundage,
right,
who I've known since we were kids, we stole cars together, we joined the Marine Corps together, we
of course
went to war
you
together.
As we all do.
Right. So if I've got that as my inner smile, I'm thinking about Ron,
right,
and I do it.
Yeah.
Is that going to change the response if I'm thinking of Jack Nicholson, who I've always wanted to meet?
Yes, absolutely.
So that'll change the response.
You'll say, I mean, remember, what we're doing here is we're sending signals of recognition, of greeting, and so on, and it's being part of the group. The more connected you can be to the person that is driving you in a smile, the more realistic, the more powerful, the more natural your greeting signals will be, and the better this whole thing will work, right? So why? Because you're signaling intimacy, basically, right? If you have a casual friend that you kind of like, you'll be a more casual signal. Shall we say the intensity of the signal reduces, and I mean I can't give you anything hard in terms of the science in it because I'm not sure anyone's really tested this. But my instinct would say that the weaker your connection is in terms of the emotions, the less meaningful the signal will be, because all the non-verbals, remember, it's not just the eyebrows, it's what happens with the eyebrow flash that designs it. It tells it's whether it's sexual or it's greeting. And also the intensity of that, I suspect, would also be altered by your emotional state.
Okay, so if I want to make somebody feel like we've known each other forever, I could think about Ron.
Yes.
But if I wanted to make somebody think, I really want to meet you, I could think of Jack Nicholson.
Yes and no, because it depends on how personally, I'd recommend you use your Ron signal, because it's basically saying, we're really good friends already. It presupposes the relationship, right? Thanks. As opposed to the Jack Nicholson thing, because what if you're, and I'm not saying that you are, but what if someone was like, say, starstruck, right? Jack Nicholson, yay, I'd really like to see you. So it becomes, this is something we talk about more in the audio course, which I didn't want to spend too much time on here, because this basically fixes the problem. These are rapport mistakes, right? One of the biggest mistakes people make in rapport is trying to get the other person to like them. Because now you're expecting something from them, right? Oh, hi, Mickey. Can I do anything for you? Is it okay? I mean, are you okay? It's good, right?
Lovely.
Now, and you just did a great example of that. It's like, right? Do you see the non-verbals? Leave me alone, right? But I'm being friendly, aren't I? I mean, we've all had this, right? We all have friends, or acquaintances, shall we call them, who are so eager to please, they annoy us. Like, they want to do you favors, like, just leave me alone. But think about it, isn't that insane? Someone's going out of the way to help you, to do stuff for you, to make your life easier, and you get annoyed by it? The thing that you're getting annoyed by is the expectation. The loop is basically self-esteem loop. They need your approval to feel good about themselves, so they need something from you. And what you're responding to is them wanting something from you, needing something from you, and that's what you take offense at. In the same way as a homeless person asking for money, they need something from you, and that's what you feel imposed by. Or the poor salesperson who's trying to sell you something, rather than just letting you buy something, they need something from you, they expect something from you, and those are the signals you're responding to by being put off by it. And of course, stars get the same thing, right? You think about it, it makes sense. Their fans need them to respond with affection, with love, or whatever it is, and it's imposing upon them. So that's the reason. That's the only reason I would use as a caveat with that, because you don't want to send signals of need, right, of expectation, because that tends to turn people off. That tends to break rapport, because people feel put upon. My recommendation is find someone inside your own experiences, or a group of people, right? And by the way, pets work as well. I often use one of my pet dogs when I was a kid. It was a great dog. It was one of my best friends, right? Use that emotional connection, because it presupposes a warm, intimate relationship. And sometimes people can't handle that kind of warmth. That's because they have personal issues as well. that'll bump them into the closed category. In which case, it tells you something as well, something very valuable, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thanks a lot. That took care of it.
Thank you. Go ahead, John.
Actually, it was just an observation, but it
Okay.
kind of ties in. I was in the eyebrow group.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever I ran into someone from the poker face group who I had met before, and they didn't flash back, I was like, what the hell did I do?
What the hell's wrong with you,
Yeah.
right?
Jeez.
Schmuck. Gah, come on.
Yeah.
Absolutely, right? I mean, if you want to, if you don't have any, may I do something a little mean to you, but just to demonstrate something? So you guys will see this as well. Coming up, and just imagine we've not met in a long time. Go, hey John, how's it going? It's good to see you again, right? Come on up here, right? Normal friendly greeting, right? No to the hourglass flash and so on, right? Now let's do the same thing again. We haven't seen for a while. We'll walk up towards each other, and we're going. Did you see his reaction? Right? And I apologize for doing that too, because it's not a nice thing to do. But you know, you saw it coming. You knew it was a setup, right? There was no personal animosity or anything like that involved. And yet we still responded. And it's a powerful feeling, wasn't it? And you can tell it's a powerful feeling. I didn't even see what he did because I was looking the other way. And I know for a fact that his response would have been very strong, a strong physical gesture of shock, surprise, probably a little bit of disgust, body toning with like a kind of quizzical look, maybe a little slight sense of hostility, right? Would that be a relatively accurate read of what he said? I didn't see any of that. Why? Because, we'd not call this snubbing someone or something else. It's when the signals get reversed, we're basically saying, you're not important enough, you're not part of the scribe, you're not important enough, you're not good enough, and we're basically directly attacking someone's self-esteem at that point. Does that make sense? I want to thank you for doing that, because I know it's not pleasant. Give a nice round of applause for that. Is this stuff useful to you guys?
Yeah.